Okay, so last time we discussed about quota and voluntary export restraint under non-tariff trade barriers. So this is also a barrier when you put regulations, okay, particularly the health and safety regulations. Then it will put a barrier on international trade. Sometime due to health issues, we put a barrier on trade. For example, when there was bird flu problem, particularly in Thailand, then different countries impose restriction on the import of chicken meat from Thailand. And also there was, mad cow disease in United States. So then other countries, they put restriction on the import of beef meat from United States. So whenever uh, there is some health issue, then we put restrictions on the trade. Okay, same is with us. Uh, we supposed to export mangoes to Japan, but they impose restrictions on the import of mango from Pakistan. Also, European countries, they impose restriction on the import of seafoods from Pakistan, making the health factor for their restrictions. Okay, and also
सर
government. Yes,
सर फजीला ऐड करने का कह रही हैं वो लॉबी में।
मैंने एक्सेस दिया है, वो खुद ऐड नहीं हो पा रहे। ठीक है, अब हो गई हैं। ओके, and sometimes government purchasing restrictions, maybe bias against foreign goods. Okay, so this is also a factor that reduce the trade and would be considered as barriers. And then we also have international cartel. Do you know what is cartel? In which market we have cartel? Yes, anyone? You study different market structure in your microeconomics course. Okay, you studied about perfect competition, you studied about monopoly, and then monopolistic competition and oligopoly. So when there is oligopoly market, then there are few seller, okay, in the market. So when there are few seller, so there is a possibility of cartel. They make an agreement that they will produce monopoly output and they will charge monopoly price and earn monopoly profit. So although they are under oligopoly market structure, in monopoly there is only one firm, but in oligopoly market there are more than one firm, but there are few firms, 10, 12 firm like this. So there is a possibility they collide with each other and then they make an agreement that they will produce monopoly output so that they can charge monopoly price and then they will earn monopoly profit because monopoly profit is higher than the other market profit. So that's why there is a possibility of cartel. Same cartel we see internationally. So OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Country. This is the example of international cartel where the petroleum exporting countries, they come up with an agreement. They will produce this much petrol so that they can charge a price, higher price in the international market and earn greater profit. So then once the total production is decided by OPEC, then each country gets its share of production. So sometimes we see that there is a decline in the international price of oil. So again, OPEC call a meeting and they want to see that which country is violating the allocated share. So because if you are allocated to produce 20% of the total output of the oil and then you are producing more than 20%, and then there will be more supply of oil in the international market and this will result decrease in the international price of oil. So cartel also act as a restriction on trade because we limit our production. So when we are limiting our production, we are limiting our exports. So this is also limiting the imports. So volume of trade will decrease. Then there is a dumping issue also. So dumping exists when the sales price in the importing country is lower than the sales price in the exporting country. So the sales price in your own country is higher, but the country where you are exporting, then in that country your sale price is lower. So the country where you are exporting, that country is the importing country. So it means like in your domestic markets, you are selling the same product at $100, but in the other market, international market, in some other country, you are selling the same product at a lower price, maybe $80. Okay, so this will be called as dumping. Okay, or the sales price in the importing country is below the cost of production. So you are selling your product in some other country, which is importing country, at a price which is lower than the cost of production. So this would be called as dumping. Okay, and then we have different types of dumping. Okay, we have three types of dumping. We have persistent dumping, we have sporadic dumping, and we have predatory dumping. So persistent dumping is the continuous tendency of a domestic monopolist to maximize total profit by selling the commodity at a higher price in the domestic market than internationally. So it means in the domestic market, you are selling your product at a higher price, but in the international market, you are selling the same product at a lower price where you are supposed to meet with your competitors. So in this way, what is the possibility that you want to drive out your competitor from the market by selling your product at a lower price internationally. Okay, then this is another type of dumping, which is predatory dumping. This is the temporary sale of a commodity at a below cost or at a lower price abroad in order to drive foreign producer out of business. Okay, and once you drive out your competitor in the foreign market, then such firm, those who are doing dumping, they increase their price and they take the advantage of newly acquired monopoly power. Okay, because you lower the price of your product in the foreign market, in some other countries market, and then because they cannot compete, you're selling your product at a below cost, or you're selling your product at a lower price than compared to your domestic price in your own country. So the foreign competitor will not be able to compete with that firm and they will drive out of the business. And once they drive out of the business, then that firm which is doing predatory dumping will get a monopoly power, and then after getting a monopoly power, they increase their price because they know that now there is no competition and you are the only firm in the market. Then we have third type of dumping, which is sporadic dumping, and this is the occasional sale of a commodity at a below cost or at a lower price abroad in order to unload an unforeseen and temporary surplus of the commodity without having to reduce domestic price. Sometime the firm produces output in their own country where they unfortunately suppose their demand is not as much as they were expecting, so there will be a surplus of that product. Now if they bring that surplus output in their own market, there is a fear that the prices will go down. Okay, so to avoid this, to avoid the decrease in the price of their product in the domestic market, what they do, they bring that product in the international market. They sell that product in some other market at a lower cost, at a lower price or below the cost of their production, just to get rid of that surplus output. Now, if you look at in all these three cases, they are not good for the country which is importing the product, because if you are selling, if the foreign firm is selling their product in your market at a lower price or at a lower cost, below cost, then this will destroy domestic industry. It will not be possible for the domestic industry to compete with this foreign firm, those who are doing dumping. And under these, you see, if there is a continuous tendency, it's okay. Okay, but it will hurt your domestic market, domestic industry. If there is, sporadic dumping, which is occasional sale, okay, this will be okay for some time period. They are selling their product at a below cost or at a lower price in your market. Okay, but this is very dangerous. Predatory dumping, temporary sale of a commodity at a below cost. So temporary, the foreign firm are selling their product in your market at a lower price or at below cost, and their objective is to drive out the producers out of business, their competitors out of business, and then they want to acquire monopoly power. And once they acquire monopoly power, they raise the price, and then they raise the price to such an extent that it will be equivalent to monopoly price, which is very high. And so it means the economy, domestic economy will suffer a lot. Those who are importing this product, they will suffer a lot. Uh, First, they will suffer that domestic industry would be destroyed because of this predatory dumping. And the second thing is the foreign producer who are selling their product in your market, they will charge a very high price, which is monopoly price. So your consumers will also suffer. So it means producers will suffer. They will be driven out of the business, and consumers will also suffer because of the higher price they will charge after predatory dumping. So this is not allowed. Dumping is not allowed even under WTO regulations. WTO says there should be free trade, there should be no restrictions. But if there is a dumping, it is allowed under WTO. We have to impose anti-dumping duty. Now, anti-dumping duties could be imposed, equivalent to the amount of dumping. For example, if a Chinese firm in the Beijing, they are selling a mobile phone, and the price of the mobile phone in US dollar is $100. Now, the same mobile phone they are selling in Pakistani market at $80. Okay, in their own market in Beijing, they are selling $100, and if we assume that there is no cost transport, then in the Islamabad market, they should also sell it in $100, but they are selling it at $80, $20, lower than their domestic market. Even if we add the cost of transportation, it should be higher than the price in the Beijing. But if they want to do dumping, they will sell it at a lower price. Now, if they are selling that same mobile phone at $80, then it will be difficult for domestic producer to compete with the Chinese firm. So what will happen? They will drive out of the business. So once they drive out of the business, then this firm will increase the price. Maybe they will increase the price to $120, $130. Okay. So this means Pakistani producers, they will suffer, and Pakistani consumers, they will also suffer. So under such circumstances, it is allowed even under WTO regulations that we can impose anti-dumping duty. And this anti-dumping duty could be equivalent to the amount of dumping. In this case, the dumping is of $20. So we can impose $20 anti-dumping duties on that mobile phone. Then the price will become $100 in Pakistani market also. Then we can allow to sell. So in that case, surely they will not, because their purpose, if their purpose is to do dumping and drive out Pakistani producer out of the business, they will not, uh, continue their business. Okay. So countervailing duty, anti-dumping duties, it is allowed. It is allowed under WTO and also in U.S. international trade laws. And they allow for imposition of tariff or countervailing duties, anti-dumping duties. And this is imposed just sufficient to raise the domestic price to either the foreign price or average cost of production. Then sometime there are export subsidies, and it is also can be regarded as a form of dumping. Now, if there are export subsidies, this is a granting of a tax relief to exporters, subsidized loans to foreign buyers to stimulate nation exports. So this is also not allowed because this is also considered as a form of dumping. The example of this is, suppose we are selling uh, rice in the international market, and India is also selling rice in the international market. So Pakistan and India, they are competitor for the rice in the international market. Now, if our farmers, they are not getting any export subsidy, suppose they are not getting any tax relief, or they are not getting any subsidized loan, or there is no subsidy on electricity or water or other. So in that case, it means our farmers, if they are competing with Indian farmers in the international market, and if they are getting subsidy, suppose Indian farmers, they are getting subsidized loan, they are getting uh, tax relief, okay, and they are getting other subsidies. So in that case, once you are getting a subsidy, this means your cost of production will decrease by the amount of subsidy. So if we are selling, if our cost of production is $80, and then plus $20 is our profit margin, so we will sell that rice equivalent to some unit in the international market by for $100. Now, if there is no subsidy, then Indian farmer, then there will be a fair competition. If we are not getting any kind subsidy and Indian farmers are not getting any subsidy, then there will be a fair competition in the international market. But if suppose Indian farmers they are getting a subsidy of $20 on a particular unit of rice, so now adding cost and profit margin, everything, they can sell their product in the international market at $80 because we are not getting any subsidy. So we have to sell our product in the international market at $100. So surely there will not be a fair competition. People will buy from Indian rice and we will be drive out of the competition in the international market. So that's why dumping is not allowed and export subsidy is not allowed because this is also regarded as dumping. So export subsidies are illegal by international agreement, so by WTO agreement, but still they are used. We see that some countries they are using these subsidies. We see that US and Japan and other countries, even developing countries, we are also using export subsidies. We give subsidized loans to farmers. We have subsidy on electricity. We have subsidy on fertilizer. We have subsidy on pesticide and others. Okay, so still it's there, no? But it is under international agreement. It is not allowed. Then there are different arguments for protectionism, and we will see whether this argument is true or false or questionable. Argument number one is that trade restrictions are needed to protect domestic labor against cheap foreign labor. So it is said that we have to put trade restriction, we have to impose tariff, we have to impose quota, and we have to protect domestic labor against cheap foreign labor. So for example, Japanese labor are expensive. Bangladesh labor are they are cheap. Their wages are low. So then they put an argument that we have to impose restrictions because if Japanese are producing rice, okay, their cost of production would be high because their labor is expensive. If Bangladesh they are producing rice, their cost of production would be lower because their labor cost is low. But this argument is not acceptable for protectionism because this is false argument. The reason is that labor is not the only factor of production. We also have land, we have capital, there are other factors of production. So making ground, labor is the only factor of production. So this is not acceptable. That's why, because sometimes also if even if the labor is cheap and in one country and it is expensive in some other countries, we have to compare the productivity also. Just imagine the productivity of labor in Japan and the productivity of labor in Bangladesh. Okay, so they are more productive. So if you are more productive, then surely you will get more because you are producing more output. So if the productivity of Japanese labor is double than the productivity of Bangladeshi labor. So if Bangladeshi labor is getting $10 and Japanese labor are getting $20 per day, so this means wage is same because their productivity is high and your productivity is low. So this argument is considered as false and this cannot be accepted as an argument for protectionism. Then there is another argument which is said that scientific tariffs are needed so that domestic producer can compete. We say that uh, our producer cannot compete the foreign producers because our cost of production is high, the foreign producer cost of production is low, so we cannot compete with the foreign producer. So it is said that this argument says that we have to impose scientific tariff. And what is scientific tariff? Scientific tariff raises the price of imports to the domestic price. So this means we have to impose a tariff so that we can raise the price of import and make it equivalent to the price which is of the product which is we are producing domestically. So if we are importing a product which is $50 price, but in the domestic market we see that our cost is $60. So we have to impose scientific tariff so that the $50 it is increased to $60. Then we have to compete with the foreign producer. But this argument is not acceptable because if we impose a tariff, scientific tariff, which raise the price of import and make it equivalent to the domestic price, then it will eliminate imports because if the prices are same, we are not talking about quality. We are assuming that quality is same for both products. We are preferring foreign product because their price is low. Okay, so if quality of both product is same, now then the consumer will prefer that product where they are getting where they have to pay lower price. So if for a foreign product you have to pay $50, okay, okay, after Azan I will continue my lecture. Yes. So again, scientific tariff argument, this is not acceptable and is considered as false because this will eliminate the trade. Okay. Then next argument is that trade restrictions are needed to reduce domestic unemployment. It is said that if we put restriction on trade, so suppose if we put restriction on import, then the same good we will produce domestically. So our demand for domestic goods will increase. Then to produce that good domestically, there will be increase in the demand for labor, and this will increase employment and reduce unemployment. But this argument is questionable because someone else export or our import. So if we are putting a restriction on the imports, so we are reducing our imports. So this means uh, there would be a decrease in the export of our trading partner. And we are exporting to some good to that country. So our exports are the imports of that country. So once we put restrictions on trade and we impose suppose tariff on imports, our imports decreases and we are trying to produce that good domestically. It's okay, our production will increase, employment will increase, and unemployment will decrease. But the question is if there is a retaliation by the trading partner, because when we are decreasing our imports, this means our trading partner exports are decreasing. So what will happen? They will retaliate. They will also impose restrictions on imports. So when they impose restriction on their imports decreases. Decrease in their imports means our exports will decrease. So when our exports decreases, it means our production will decrease for exportable goods. Then the demand for labor will decrease, and then the unemployment will increase. So on the one hand, we are trying to decrease unemployment by putting restrictions on import. But on the other hand, if there is a retaliation by a trading partner, this will be increasing our unemployment. So maybe there is no change in the situation of employment because one hand there is a decrease in unemployment, on the other hand there is increase in unemployment, so net effect could be zero. So that's why this argument is questionable. If there is no retaliation by the trading partner, then this will work, that unemployment will decrease. But history shows that there is no such case, no? There being no retaliation by foreign nations. So it is surely there will be a retaliation. That's why this argument is questionable. Then again, this is also a questionable argument that trade restrictions are needed to cure a balance of payment deficit. Now, suppose we have a deficit in our balance of payment. Okay, let me give you a very simple example. We have export and we have import. We have a deficit, we have a trade deficit if our imports are more than our exports. Okay, so then we are saying that okay, let's put a restriction on imports so that we could be able to cure the deficit. Okay, but again the question is when we are imposing a restriction on imports and we are trying to reduce the deficit. This is only possible if there is no retaliation by our trading partner, because if we reduce our imports, their export will decrease. So in retaliation, they will also reduce their import. So when they are reducing their import, this means our export will decrease. So on the one hand, we are reducing our imports to improve our trade balance, but because there is a retaliation, so our export would also decrease. So the net effect would be no change in the balance of payment position. So that's why this question, that uh, this argument that trade restriction are needed to cure a balance of payment deficit is a questionable argument, because it is only possible if there is no retaliation. But surely, if there are some restrictions, there will be a retaliation by the trading partner. This is only the qualified argument, okay, and we agree with this. And this is the infant industry argument. This says that infant industries needed to be protected so that they can become established industry. And this argument is acceptable because once we have infant industry, we have to protect our industry so that the industry become mature, and once the industry become mature, then we have to remove those protections and there would be a competition. For example, if we want to establish automobile industry, so already there are automobile industries, Toyota and Honda and Mitsubishi and all this. So we have our automobile industry, we have just started, so that would be considered as infant industry. So it is accepted that it would be very difficult for infant industry to compete with mature industry. How come our automobile industry would be able to compete with Toyota and Honda and such mature industries? So what we can do, we have to protect our industry for some time period, and then we have to give time for that infant industry to gain new technology, to reduce their cost of production and become more competitive with the mature industries. So once that infant industry get all this technology and become cost competitive, then we can remove that protection. So just like there is an example of Tata in India automobile industry, they protected that industry from mature foreign automobile industry, so that that
क्या
industry
बना रही
mature. Okay. Okay. And then now we see that Tata is a well mature automobile industry, and they are exporting their automobile to different countries. So this is possible. So this is a qualified argument for protectionism. But the problem is that how long we have to protect? Okay. How long we have to protect? So it cannot be for indefinite period. There must be some timeline. No? This is 5 year or 10 year. You see, sometime we protect our industry for many years. So this is also not acceptable. No? For 20 year and 30 year, we are going to protect that industry. So then the problem is that once an industry is protected by government, And whenever government try to remove that protection, they lobby and for the approach to the government then that when this protection is removed, we will not be able to compete with foreign producer, and then our production will decrease and our employment will decrease and unemployment will increase. So that is the problem. So, but the, the main thing is that this protection must be of limited duration. You cannot give it for unlimited time period. And this duration should be used to acquire competitiveness in the international market. So I will stop here. This is about all the arguments. Next class we will discuss about WTO.